Hello, welcome back to the Fighting OCD podcast. It has been a long time since I have recorded an episode. Why? Because I have a hard time just talking to the camera. So, I am trying something new. I have brought my lovely assistant, Kathleen, here today. Um, to try something new, um, an interview, and because I do much better when I'm talking to an actual person. So I am turning this interview over to Kathleen uh, Fincher. She is the service coordinator at my apartment complex. And uh, Go ahead.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in. I um I am actually honored that Gregory asked me to join this podcast because really we're going to talk about how important it is for people with OCD to have a support system and how important it is for Gregory to have a support system where he lives. I am a resident service coordinator for Rio Vista Apartments in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I have been a service coordinator for Rio Vista for 17 years. And Gregory has been a resident for a very long time, about 10 years, Gregory, or
Uh,
yeah, so
2009. So I guess
yes.
14.
Yeah. So basically, working with a property that has senior, disabled, and handicapped residents, the service coordinator is for residents, and they are here to support residents. We're here to help residents remain independent. And I think that having that support is very vital in a way that helps a resident just go about their day-to-day lives knowing that they have a support system.
Yeah.
I know specifically, I mean, we could talk about, let me just start with this way. So, Gregory has, over the years, really taught me a lot about OCD. I have gone to several trainings and I have taken mental health first aid certification, and they do touch on OCD, which and their presentations and their information is wonderful. But when Gregory decided to write a book, I did read it, and I was just amazed at how reading his book made me understand from his perspective what he deals with on a day to day basis, what he has dealt with. Yes, there's the book. What he has dealt with since he was first diagnosed with OCD. Um, just a journey that he takes you on the journey, and he has you understand OCD in such a different way. So, anybody who does service coordination, if you're in mental health, if you're in any profession that you really think that you need to know a little bit more about this particular diagnosis, I do recommend you read it. I will I will tell you, working with Gregory, being the service coordinator, we have um, to advocate. And one of the ways that I've advocated for
So,
Gregory is
um, sorry.
that's okay.
So can you mentioned so that there's been a progression in your understanding of OCD. So what was your understanding before you met me? And what was your
Okay.
understanding before you read the book? And then what was your understanding uh, after? Because I also did presentation here
Yes.
for the people.
Yes.
So if you could kind of
Right.
delineate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when I was first learning about OCD years and years ago, when I first started, it was in the medical profession, and learning about that, it was my understanding basically was it is the stereotypical um, perspective of OCD, which is people wash their hands 100 times, or they turn the stove, check the stove, or things like that. And it is so much more. It is so much broader, so much more in depth. And basically, I think that's where my understanding of OCD was when I first learned even what OCD was.
So
You know, you
did they get into any understanding of like how it worked?
so basically not in a lot of detail.
Okay.
So it was like I said, it was very. It wasn't something that was touched on um, in a big way. We basically covered it as a mental health disorder, disability,
Yeah.
whatever your preference to call it is. Um, it just wasn't as in depth. We didn't get the perspective of what your actual brain is going
And are
through
you talking
during.
about like in college or is this
No,
along the
I'm talking about specifically more so when I started the service coordinator
okay.
position here at Rio Vista. Because we do take mental health training. We do, HUD requires us to do continuing education. And the first year of service coordination, you have 36 hours, and there on out, you do 12 hours.
Mm.
And a lot of different, trainings that we are offered through all of the different mental health organizations out there. They do offer us a lot of training, and a lot of times we do get to pick and choose some of the things that we are doing our CEUs for. But it it it's just we never had a perspective of someone who actually has OCD
Yeah.
talk about what they go through. It's always a doctor, always a practitioner saying this is what the symptoms are. This is so we never had that perspective of someone who is living
Right.
with OCD explain to us what they go through, what the struggle is, and what they've
So
experienced.
I'm
That I have never been.
thinking of
Yeah.
the brief period that I was in college. I took a psychology class and they did mention OCD there, but it was incredibly brief, like you were
Yes.
saying, and like so to the point that like there it was just part of a lesson. It was like 5 or 10 minutes.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that's the way it was in your trainings, or if it was like one
Somewhat.
training
Yes.
was on. Did you ever have a specific training on OCD itself?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
It was a mix. It was a mix of mental health
Okay.
disorders. Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. No.
That's
So
okay.
be so again. So that's what it was like before you met me. What what was it like after you met me? What?
So when I started working with you as the service coordinator, resident relationship evolved. I really was taken back on how open you were with helping me learn as well. I just remember in one instance where you would come in my office and say, "Am I okay?" And at first, I was like, "Oh, geez, what do you mean? Are you okay? Did something happen? Am I
Right.
okay?" Was your response. And I said, "Okay, in what perspective?" And you're like, "Just in general with the housing. Did anybody complain about me?" And so I, I really had to understand when you came in my office asking me if you were okay, that that was just your general anxiety about somebody complaining about you, or did you not do something and you're in trouble with the property manager, which is something that OCD is a part of, which you can become paranoid that somebody's mad at you or something went wrong.
Yeah,
um
and including you. I mean, most
right.
of the a lot of the time when I say that, um it's primarily, are we okay? Did I just say something to make you really mad and upset?
Right. Right.
But you're right. There absolutely is. It's this multi-layered thing, but the most basic level, when I ask people that question, it's just me and that other person to start with. Um,
Yeah.
because yeah,
Yeah, and then over the years, when you would come in and say, "Am I okay?" and I don't know if you could vouch for this, but I would say, "You're fine. You're following the lease. I haven't heard any complaints," and so on and so on. And then now it's like, okay, because we have that connection where I understand what you're asking and I understand
yeah,
what you need to hear from me to validate
right.
you.
And I don't ask that question a lot anymore, do I?
No, you don't.
Yeah.
No. And I don't know if that's a comfort
Yeah.
that you have established. Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, yes, and probably the other thing that you were about to say. um, just yeah, it's so OCD. Uh, it kind of has to vet people, um, and until you're vetted, there's a huge amount of doubt and anxiety. Uh, but once you're vetted by OCD, which this aspect is really strange because most of OCD is pointing towards you're not okay. But in this one instance, being vetted by OCD means that you are okay. You understand. And yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But
So I
yeah, it's
think
an
that's a
individual.
lesson.
Sorry.
Um, that's part of my learning lesson with OCD is I have learned how to respond to you to make you feel at ease, and that just helps in a big sense. And one of the other things that we do deal with service coordination and um, a resident with OCD is inspections. Inspections are um, a big worry, cause of anxiety
Yeah.
because
And
um,
when I first came and we first discussed this issue, I, I was absolutely terrified. I don't think
yes,
I'd ever been that terrified in a discussion before. Because yeah, I understood the seriousness of it, and yeah, I understood. I can't. I I sorry. So just
yeah. So let me ask you this, Gregory. When we started learning how to communicate and stuff with each other. When I said to you, is it okay if I show you, if I come into your apartment with you and show you what the inspector's going to do and what they're going to look
Yes.
for, and everything? Did that help
Yes.
you in a sense to really
Yes.
um, lessen the anxiety of
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Um, definitely.
Yeah.
Um,
And then another part of that is you're very fortunate that you have a good support system on the outside of the apartments, because with your particular OCD, you can't really clean and touch the toilet and everything. So you have someone who comes in and helps you with
right.
that. So,
Yeah.
um, again, you have the service coordinator, you have the staff, you have a friend that comes and helps you. So you're very fortunate to have a good support system in that way.
Yes. I
Yes.
have always been blessed with a good support system. Um, including you, for sure. Um, but yeah, I'm finding myself at a loss for words. Suddenly.
That's
But,
okay. That's okay. I don't know if you want to kind of touch base on one of the situations where myself, being the service coordinator, advocated for you in a certain situation. Um,
um,
and that was a first for me as well.
yeah,
So, um,
uh, I definitely want to do that. First, I'm the one who keeps distracting from this, but
that's okay.
um, understanding. Okay, so what you understood before you met me, we know,
Mm-hmm.
and then so what we talked about that meeting process,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and then once you knew me, um, how long was it until you got my book?
Oh, geez. Well, let's do the math. If what year did you write the book in?
Oh, that's a good point. That's a great one. So
The year you
duh. So I published it in 2014. I did write it in 2005. Um, and I do remember having, even before it was published, I would give it to people to read. It just was like this staple bound little thing. Um,
right, and because let me just say this. Someone who's writing a book about OCD, who has OCD, is in itself an accomplishment, and something that you had sometimes where you're just like, this isn't right, this isn't, I mean, self-doubting yourself. And I remember at times you would bring me little things and I'd read it and I'd say, that sounds really, no, that's not right. And just the self-doubt that you had, it was probably a longer process, as if I were to write a book about something, because your OCD starts kicking in and makes you, with one thing that I've noticed with you is, you're somewhat of a perfectionist. Um,
yes, and that
yeah.
that
So,
particular aspect of Gregory Conrad was known
right.
since I was in kindergarten. you know.
Right.
You'd get the assignments where you're cutting something out of a shape out of a piece of paper, and I would cut just like a millimeter too far, and I would just start bawling, and I am the
Yeah.
worst, stupidest, and
Yeah. Right.
so yeah, that label was well in place, decade or
Yeah, I
more
do
before.
remember when you said you can get the book on was it Amazon? Where was it that you could get the book again?
So
Refresh my memory.
it's on Amazon as a paperback, and then it's
Right.
available on I mean, on Kindle,
Yeah.
and then Audible.
I just remember, I will share this. I remember getting a book. And I remember telling you when I get my book, I want it signed. I want an autographed version. And I remember when I finally got it, I was like, oh, is excited, like it was something that I almost helped write because I was along the journey
Yeah,
with you. And I just felt so proud that you had accomplished this with so much, you know, I guess it's joy and pain at the same time, with the OCD kind of wanting to tell you to stop, and you just kept going. So I kind of was very, very excited about
right.
that.
And I mean, definitely the other thing about the book taking a long time was I never found an actual publisher,
Right.
and just having the support of others through the process, that were like really able to help fashion that, um,
Right.
uh, was uh, was hard, in places, definitely.
Right.
You know, because I lack so much self-confidence. Um,
Mhm.
it's easier to, when you hit a bump in the road, to be like, okay, I surrender. I knew this was stupid and worthless, and um, but thank goodness I had other support systems that were more personal, since I didn't have the professional kind of
Right.
support
Right.
system, that
Right.
partly maybe because I the limitations of OCD, like, I wasn't able to graduate college and things, where you just, as you go along life, you're able to uh, gain more and more support and knowledge of how to come to support, and uh, yeah,
Right.
so
Right. And let me say this as well. So it was after the book was out, residents here at Rio Vista um, kind of put two and two together. I mean, your picture's on a book. Your card is out. You were allowed to put your card in the lobby. Um, so a lot of people were coming to me with questions, and so that's when I think I approached you and said, "Would you like to do a presentation on OCD?" The manager, they okayed it, and I thought, okay, instead of them asking questions, I just thought, well, maybe it's better if you just did a presentation. And I think it was just amazing to me how many people showed so much support for you, because it's a wonderful thing, in service coordination. confidentiality is really upheld at the highest standard. With your circumstance, because you had already went public with your book, um, you know, it was already out there. So you basically let everyone know, I have OCD, I'm Gregory
You
Gene
you
Conrad,
had
and they
you
knew you
had
lived with me.
permission to
Yeah. So it permission to tell them, yes, that's his book. Yes, he obviously that's him. But not only that, for you to do a presentation for them because they live with you. I'm the service coordinator and I'm here, but I'm here on a work level. You have residents that live here that are living in your community. So for them to be able to understand you from that perspective, I think is just absolutely wonderful too. Because if you go to one of the functions here, the ladies had bingo in the evening and they had different functions. And if you started saying to one of them, I whatever was bothering you, had they had not understood you from the presentation that you did, I think, residents' reaction would have been a little different.
right. Well, and
So,
just like with you and the book, with the other residents, I was open from the start that I had this, and here's a little bit about it, and
right.
um,
Let me ask you this. Are you more comfortable uh, that the residents understand you and accept you and, all of the above,
right.
having that presentation? I mean, how did that make you feel?
Well, so honestly, it was. I don't know if I really noticed a difference in people and how they treated me, other than the comment of, "Wow, that was a really good presentation. I learned a lot." And again, the doubt and the struggle to believe them, but at the same time, because I had known them for so long and OCD had vetted them as well along the
Okay.
way, I was able to take that compliment, that feedback, and be like, okay, I really doubt this, but it's this person, so I have to believe that for them this is true.
Right.
And so for me, so the book is just a journey through like 3 months of my life, and just with kind of flashbacks to how it was before and things. But in the book, I never really sat down and said, this is I I didn't define OCD as concretely. And I certainly didn't um I didn't get into the what causes it, um and how it works. And um just going back to when I was at the hospital in Wisconsin, that specialized in OCD, they're learning
Right.
about that, and then um, visiting with members of the church there that took me in and explaining it to them.
Right.
Then that just uh, it's just a whole other level of before I understood that this is the case, but suddenly it makes sense why this is the case. At least that's how I perceive it.
Right, right,
Uh, So you agree
right.
with that?
Yeah, yeah, I
No.
do. I think I think basically the residents um they learned about OCD. They appreciate your sharing your situation. And I think that for you, that's what you wanted them to know. And that's that. And I think that that's a great thing for you to be open with the people that you do live in the community you live with. You know, I think that that's a wonderful thing. Um, that you're able to inform people. You know, it just any time that somebody can learn something to help us understand someone or a situation, I'm 100% all for
Yeah.
that. And that's just
And so
my thoughts on it.
was there was there any next level understanding for you after the presentation? Because I know that I had sat down with you previously and really gone into that kind of thing of how it works and what it is and things. So I was there anything in that presentation that was surprising to you that lit some remaining light bulb that was dim? Um, and I mean, it's okay if the answer is no.
No, I'm trying to think, and I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. I think that the book took me to a place. It's just, you know, when we don't have something, when we haven't experienced something, or we haven't dealt with anything personally in our lives, we can say, geez, that must be terrible, or oh, I'm so sorry. But I think when I read the book, certain things, uh, it just resonated with me to where I was like, wow, I get it. And I just don't know how to explain it
No,
any other way. And I don't think that you doing the presentation, um, it didn't, it, it gave me a little bit of more perspective how you felt, um, personally, you know, the feelings you were having, but it didn't give me any more insight in the OCD. The book itself for me was the wow.
yeah.
I get it. I get the behavior. I get it. I get it now. So not saying that the
No,
presentation
that
wasn't
yeah, yeah,
fabulous. I just think, especially for people that are disabled themselves, when you do a presentation for some of the audience and population that are disabled themselves, I think you need to keep it where it's um, they're able to receive it. And I think with the presentation that you did a really good job of that. And then if they wanted more information or they, you know, were more curious or
I
whatever,
could
they
get
could
the
have,
quarrel.
you know, absolutely read the book. I have shared your book with staff. I have shared your book with family members. I have shared your book quite frequently. And I actually have two copies now. I inherited a copy somehow. And so now I have two copies. So they are lent out quite frequently to people. Um, you know, so rest assured that it is definitely um, people's response in our profession and in other and even not in this profession are, you know, absolutely learning something. And I think if you can learn something and
Yeah,
do your job better because you've learned
right.
something to help someone, then I'm 100% for that.
Okay.
But
So,
I don't know if you
um,
want to talk
yeah,
about, you want to,
let's switch to the other one.
yeah. Okay, so I'll let you kind of explain what the situation. kind of was and how
Okay.
I'll explain my role in that advocacy for you. Absolutely.
So, and before I say anything else about this, I want to make it clear that I think that this organization handled the situation very well. Um,
I agree.
and this is in no way a bad reflection on them. It's just to highlight how incredibly useful you were as a service coordinator. Um, and you know, after we're done talking about this, maybe we can contrast it with that other situation that I told you recently when you having a service coordinator would have been very useful as well. But so I
Right.
had been uh, going to a gym, and I had been talking to one of the employees, one of the staff there, and had mentioned that I was giving a talk in church, and just invited that person. And it was well received. Was my impression. And um, but then things went wrong, because to start with, um, the date of my talk in church got moved, and I didn't have this person's contact information to let them know, and I was scared to death that they would show up and then get mad saying, "You told me that you were gonna speak and you didn't speak," and I, I don't know. To an outsider, maybe that it doesn't seem terrifying, but to me, that was terrifying. And uh, I expected the terrifying part, and you know it. So I called the office of the gym, and just uh, said, "Hey, I talked to this person and invited them. Could you please reach out to them and let them know that I'm not speaking this Sunday, so they don't come uh, expecting me to speak." Um, and and that was incredibly awkward, especially because it turned out I didn't quite have this person's name down pat at the time. So um, uh, but in I think that part was fine. The trouble came the next week, when I realized, okay, I told the person to tell the person that I wasn't speaking this Sunday, but did I tell them, but he is speaking this next week?
Right.
And so I felt like, well, I need to communicate that. And but again, the just even though the first call had been received very well, I still kind of felt very awkward through the thing. Um, So the next week, I decided, well, I don't want to fully launch into this situation again with someone. Let me just see if this person is there, and if they're there, I'll communicate that. And so I called and I just asked if the person was there, and they weren't. So I was like, okay, well, thank you. And unfortunately, or for me, I mean, fortunately for them, they have multiple offices. So then I had to call another place, and just in so doing that, um, got people's attention, and
Their radar went
yeah,
up. Their radar went up a little
their
bit. Yeah.
radar, because yeah, and so they started to. Well, so what kind of radar went up, Kathleen?
Well, remember we talked about this? So you said, I just don't understand, like, why, this person's going to perceive this as this. And then I sat down with you in my office and I said, well, you have to think about it this way, Gregory. She's probably, on the younger side. She doesn't know you, and you're continually calling, trying to get messages to her. I said, in today's day and age in society, young women have to be very careful. And I just think that a red flag
Yeah,
went up for her. And that's what I mean by the radar went up, thinking, oh,
yeah,
geez, what's going on here?
and
Not understanding that your intention was nothing but consideration,
yeah,
worry, and anxiety that she was going to show up
and
somewhere
for
she
me, I
shouldn't.
I had handled this situation way better than it's been other situations in the past that I had learned from. That, I mean, it wasn't as dramatic as this, but I had
Right,
called certain people a lot in the past, and so I had kind of gotten it somewhat beaten into me. Don't call multiple times, but for me, 3 times wasn't multiple, and it was driven by the fact that, well, the one time was to tell her this, and the second and third time was to tell her this different thing. And I had to do the second and the third time because there's different
right,
offices. um
right,
and
right.
but yeah, just
So you came in my office and said, oh, the Gregory, look. Oh. And I know what that look is. What's wrong? What's the matter? What's going on? Oh,
and it
well,
took me a while to get to your office. That I
yeah,
mean, which is to say, a week or two. Um, but
right,
so
right,
I was doing my best to kind of handle this, but so then what ended up happening was the uh, the owner or manager called and said, "Hey, you've been calling for this person. Please stop." And
right.
again, ex- extremely professionally done and communicated,
Yes,
and at the same time, so they had indicated that. So I guess when the people that I called, when their antenna went up, and then they communicated this to the person that
Right.
was intended. Their antenna went up,
Right.
and then they went and
Right.
talked about it with other people there, and so their antenna went up, and so then the
Right.
other thing that was said was, oh, and there are other females here that feel uncomfortable around you, and I'm just like, oh no, what did I do? And he said,
Right.
well, they didn't specify that, and I'm thinking, asked, well, how do I know what not to do or do if I don't know what the issue is?
Right.
Um,
Right.
but as part of that part of the conversation, I was thinking, oh gosh, the person that I talked to the first time was a female. Maybe I said something. Did that make her feel uncomfortable? And the answer was no. And then we also,
Right.
I said, because I also mentioned, that I needed climbing shoes, and so when they had when they called to say please stop and desist, they and I brought that up. They were also quick to offer assistance in helping me get climbing shoes, and I I'm uh, very appreciative of the fact that people were trying to protect other people given today's world.
Absolutely. They
Uh,
were doing the right thing on
right.
their end. They
Absolutely.
just didn't know the
Yeah.
situation.
And
So when you came to my office and explained the situation, I said, "Do you want me to help you with this? This is what I can do. Yes, please." The very first conversation that I had with the person, again, very professional, listened thoroughly. Um, and then the actual upper management from that area had called me back, and I explained the situation with your permission. And I want to make this again very clear because I think this is so very important, especially for service coordinators. We want everyone to know we do protect your confidentiality absolutely 100%. So everything that we are talking about in this podcast is everything was done with your consent, because we would never do anything that you didn't know about or consented to, because not only for confidentiality reasons, but you need to be in your decision making on how you want to handle it. You need to be the one to say, I just want to let it go. And then maybe next week you'll decide not to. And that's all part of you self advocating for yourself. You need to make
well,
sure that
yeah, and
you have that
so
decision. Yeah.
another
So,
thing that about the situation was when the original call came from them to me, it was I just turned 40, and living here with 80 year olds makes
don't
this. They're just like, this is not true, but I just feel so old, and part of that is I I just lose track of what's being said. So I'm just
I think
like,
that's a lot everybody nowadays. We just have so much on our plate. We just lose our train of
so
thought
yeah,
sometimes.
I just lost it. And uh
Well,
gosh,
that's
what
okay. I'll take over for a
oh
minute. So,
so I had I had uh, uh, I had tried to explain the situation to them when they called, and um, I, but I had only explained part of it because I mean this was an initial thing and it was just in the moment, and then after
Right.
the call I'm thinking, oh, but I didn't explain the second and the third call, and so and just with the world the way it is,
Right.
I mean, how are they gonna really know that what I'm saying is legit? And so
Right.
that's
Right.
where having you is so enormously important. Um,
Right. And I appreciate that. And I think that, again, in order for myself as a service coordinator or any other service coordinator or case managers, whenever you work with someone that has OCD, how can I help you and advocate for you if I don't understand you? Right? So I think that's such a big part in understanding the illness and being able to understand. Um, and that helps me do my job better when I understand the individual person
it,
and what their needs
and
are.
that
So,
that goes beyond just understanding the OCD. It's also understanding me as a person. I mean,
right,
because I am sure there are nefarious people out there who have OCD. Um,
right,
but
right. And that's just it. And my job for you in this particular case was to have a conversation on the phone with the manager, explaining the type of person you are and how long I've known you, how long I've worked with you, with again your permission, allowing me to tell them as needed basis, basically what they needed to know about your
right.
OCD and how it affects you as far as the anxiety and the worry. And somebody like me that doesn't have OCD, if I was in that position, I'd say, oh well, they'll figure it out, you know. But again, with OCD, this would have wreaked havoc on your,
Oh,
sleeping,
it
on
did.
your
I
anxiety
mean, because
level. It did already,
yeah,
correct.
and
But it would have
right.
continued had we had not got this,
And
worked
I
out.
probably I don't know. I would have tried to reach out to them if I didn't have you, and
You
then
maybe would have ended up in a
that was
position
worse.
like somebody needs to come get this guy,
Yeah,
right?
and
Or because they wouldn't have understood.
right. And again, your call gave them the reassurance to, because they also sort of knew me as a person. They
Right,
just didn't understand the
right,
OCD part, which
right,
you helped them to understand. And so
right,
then once that was
right.
in place, they were able to go, oh, so our initial
Well,
understanding was
correct,
correct. So it
correct.
wasn't like a completely misjudging uh, situation.
No, they knew you were a very kind person, very you had well manners, but I think I had made the comment um I said, well, Gregory, some people can appear to be normal and they end up doing bad things too. Just so you understood where they were coming from. Because, you're trying to be in the middle and not say, well, they're wrong. Looking at it from
Right.
their perspective is what I was
Yeah.
trying to have you do. And then when talking to them, trying to help them understand where you were coming from. And again, they handled the situation with such professionalism. And I did tell them, I said, my job is to protect Gregory as a disabled person, as my resident, And, I know that it seems a little um, out of character for someone to do this. But again, you have to think about it from his perspective with OCD. And
And
I really was very happy that it ended in the way it did. So, and you're going to the gym now
yes, and
again.
I
Yes.
mean, I still went during that 2 week period. I just kind of did it with a lowered
But you were
head, and
still not
yeah,
comfortable. You were not comfortable,
and
right?
uh, part of me was hesitant to bring this up here because things are so good again now, and
Well, and let me just say, that's why we're not mentioning any names or anything, because by no means do we want to put any negative
and
talk
right.
about this. But it is okay for us to discuss it, because it's a situation where having a service coordinator helped you intervene, advocated on your behalf, because I had called them on your behalf, and it's a company. It's not like it's Medicare or Medicaid or, an insurance company, where this was a situation that was affecting your daily life and it needed to be addressed. And I think that it's important for people to understand those situations. Someone with OCD that, in their younger years, let's say, teenager or 20-ish, being recently diagnosed, um, their family, the support system is so important. And I think that this is just a good example of having a good support system.
And so I guess I'm thinking at this point that we've sufficiently covered this incident.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
so now let me contrast it to something else that
Okay.
happened earlier in my life. Again, illustrating how having a service coordinator, an advocate, is so helpful. Um, and so I was in Utah at the time. I was looking for a certain doctor, a chiropractor, and I had um, gone in and set up the appointment and left, and then realized, oh, I left a piece of paper that had my homework on it in there. So I went back, but when I went back, uh, the, there was no one else there. I didn't even see the receptionist. And so I was feeling weird. But I had to get that paper, and so to dispel the weirdness for me, I'm just like, "Hey, it's Gregory. I'm here. I forgot my homework." And I mean, probably most other people would have just gone in and got the paper. But so I say that because that highlighted the fact that I was there afterwards.
Right. Right.
And so, like an hour or two later, I'm back at home and I get a knock at the door, and it's a police officer. And he's saying, uh, the receptionist at this chiropractor's office, someone just stole her purse and phone, and she thinks that that's you. um, did you take uh, the her stuff? And um, so immediately I was filled with doubt because of the OCD. I even, had like visions, like this mental image video of this stuff occurring. Of, I don't know, maybe when I went in and grabbed my paper, I accidentally grabbed her stuff too, and oh gee, I mean, and I said, that doesn't sound like me, but you know, I can't, I don't know. And of course, what was the police officer's reaction to that? Uh, okay. Um,
Right.
that's not the ideal response in that situation.
Exactly.
But
Right.
again,
Right.
someone with OCD can feel so much doubt and just be on such a different plane of thought that it it just, it's, when they respond, it just is the wrong response. um
Yeah.
but um having an advocate in that situation would have helped, and it didn't.
Absolutely. Right.
I didn't have an advocate, and to make things worse, while I was saying, I don't know, I don't think I did that. And I did try, I launched into a kind of explanation of OCD and doubt and things. But
Right.
the receptionist there had said, "Well, I am 200% sure." So as a cop, what do you do? Do you believe the guy who's like, "I don't know, maybe I took it, maybe I didn't," or the person that's like, "I'm 200% sure that he did this"?
Right. Right.
And so then what happened was I had set up an appointment. So the next time I went there, uh, I still went. I'm like, well, do I go? Do I not go? Because there's this weird situation, and I'm like, well, you should go because you didn't actually do anything wrong. I mean,
Right.
I'm
Right.
pretty sure. Because even then, I'm like, well, I don't. Um, but really, it's like talking to people that knew me afterwards that were like, yeah,
Right.
you wouldn't do that. You
Right.
wouldn't be that spacey even to it just so I went, and while I was there, cops were called, and then when I'm leaving, I see them and they're off to the side, and so I'm like, do I just run home? Do I sneak off, or do I just go
Right.
up, and because all that's gonna make me look uh, guilty? And so I went up and said, "Hey, you're probably here because of me," and
Right.
and then the cop, uh, uh, who who didn't who was had less understanding of the situation, he immediately launched into, "Hey, we know you took this, and so someone just used their ATM card, and we found that ATM machine, and we're pulling that footage, and so it really, you should confess now because you did
Wow.
it." And um and just, I mean, talk about anxiety and terror.
You're right.
um
Right.
but and then 2 weeks pass, and I'm in this agitated state still about this situation, and I call the phone number that the first cop gave me, and
Right.
he had said that he would let me know when whatever happened, and so I call and I'm like, hey, what happened? And they're like, oh yeah, we caught the guy, there was ATM footage, and it wasn't you. And I'm just like, well, thanks for telling me. uh I did not say that, uh but having you there,
Right.
I would have been enormously helpful. And I mean, because what would you have
I couldn't
done?
even imagine, right? I couldn't even imagine in that situation not having OCD, being accused of something like that is overwhelmingly scary and frustrating, and you have anxiety. I couldn't even imagine in being in that situation, having OCD, the heightened level of all of that for 2 weeks straight. Um, yeah, I think I would have been saying something to those police officers, and I don't know if it would have been very nice, but I just,
Well, and
you're correct. Had you had a coordinator, a case manager, somebody to advocate for you and be on your side, I can guarantee you the 2 weeks of anguish that you had endured would have never happened because it would have been taken care of at that point, right?
yeah,
In the beginning, before you even got to a level where you had to, like, I would, when you say this story, it's almost like my mouth hits the floor, like, oh yeah, we went ahead and caught the guy, and you're like, do you understand what I've been through for 2 weeks? Do you understand? Like, don't you want to say, listen, buddy, do you
yeah.
understand what you've
Well,
caused
and
me?
and again, to be fair, so I want to make it clear that I'm not ratting on police officers.
Right,
Um,
right. No, Lisa, we love our
no,
police officers.
because
But this just brings up something to me that I think is so important, that police officers and the training that they get should absolutely include mental health training. Whether it's a crisis mental health team, just an overall mental health training for police officers, so that had the police officer that dealt with you had training, he would have said, you know what, when you said, I have OCD and this is happening, the police officer would have said, okay, Gregory, well, we're going to investigate it, but we want to let you know that we're not accusing you because you're innocent until proven guilty, and we will like, they could have done something a little different if they had
right.
some training, which I just, in my opinion, the society today, if we understand things a little bit more better and get the stigma off mental illness, we will be so much better off in the world.
And I
Yeah.
think that we've made enormous strides there over the past couple
Absolutely.
years. The
And we
pandemic
lead by
was
example.
enormously helpful in that it helped people understand mental illness better, because suddenly everyone
Right.
else was anxious, like really anxious, and
Right.
doubting,
And I mean,
and just
yeah.
I just remember when the pandemic thing started, and they're like, do the
Right.
quarantine in place. I'm talking with my therapist and I'm saying, what do I do? And she's like, what do I need to change? And she said, nothing. You've been preparing your whole life for this moment. Take a breather and relax.
Right.
So, but
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's it's so wonderful, like I said, you're very fortunate to have such a good support system, and I think we need to, you know, be advocates for everyone who has OCD or a mental health illness to try to be their advocate in any way that we
Well, and
can.
I think really just even more generally is just getting to know people, forming relationships with people, not just
Right,
with phones and computers and AI and thing. It's
right.
enormously helpful to get to know real people. And
And yet here we are on a Zoom meeting.
yeah,
Just kidding. We have to do it this way because, but I agree 100%. And I think just taking a little bit of time out to really understand. I cannot answer the phone right now. I'm in a Zoom meeting.
uh,
Um, we're going to have to cut that part out, aren't we? People
I
don't, it's like you're hanging it up, doesn't it? But okay, we're cutting that part out for sure.
I
But that's life.
it's
Um,
life. So yeah. Uh yeah, it just so I mean knowing people, being advocates for people, understanding their
right,
situation, especially with mental illness, but people without mental illness, they have
right.
quirks too, and everyone needs
Everybody had
an advocate.
absolutely,
And so
absolutely
it just, we
right.
really need to take the time to talk and listen and have conversations. And I guess this in part is me advertising that I'm starting another podcast where I'm interviewing
There you
people about their life
Yeah,
stories and just having
right,
conversations with them, just normal
right.
people. And
Just the just just the human interaction is so vital, I think, for
yeah,
everybody. It's you know, I was just talking about this today with my company. Our QA director was having a QA meeting, and I brought up, you know, so many people have, you know, activity of daily living restrictions. And one of the ones that I think we lose focus on is social frailty, because so many people don't have anybody to talk to. They don't call. Can you imagine going 3 days without seeing one person or saying hello to one person, what that does? And I think, again, being a service coordinator, my focus is to make sure everybody, at least once a day, they hear hello, how are you?
yeah,
I can't possibly do 76 residents every day, although I do maybe half because I see them passing by the office. But I think that's so important for a
yeah,
healthy uh, mental state and a healthy life, because we can get so withdrawn um,
yeah. And,
without any
and
interaction.
that's just crushing. And so I just very briefly, because we're over an hour for sure now.
Okay.
But
Okay.
just to highlight that point, I had my grandma died during the pandemic, and she was a very hardy, independent woman. I mean, up until she got COVID and was put into the hospital, she was being the caregiver of she was like 90, and she's the caregiver for like 70 or 60-year-olds. And um I don't think it was so much COVID that killed her as loneliness, because she was cut off from the world because of regulations that were in place at the
Right.
time, where she couldn't
Right.
even, her family could not visit her. And so fine, so she's like, well, I guess I don't really matter.
Have a purpose.
No one's reached out to me, and the family was calling the hospital, and we got to talk to grandma, and it was, no, we really can't do that, and like, even over the phone, that it wasn't possible because she had a what is a respirator in her throat, and so she couldn't talk with anyone. And
But she could hear you.
but she could hear. But
So, had she had been able to at least listen to your voice, Grandma, it's me, Gregory. I'm thinking of you. I love you.
but that that
That
that
it's,
didn't even happen because they.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. That's my point. Had somebody said, you know what, I'm going to put the phone to her ear, even though she can't talk, that doesn't mean she can't hear. A lot of times we forget people have other senses. Yeah.
So
And
we yeah, and again, I love the healthcare community, and I know they were stressed at the time, and
they were doing
they
what
were
they
doing,
thought was
yeah.
best.
No,
Right. I get that. But at the same time, we have to really think about at what
yeah.
cost, what are we willing to really stand and put our foot down for? I mean, yes, COVID was out there. And at this point, I think everybody was pretty much vaccinated, right? When you're,
Uh, so the we had just gotten our first vaccine
vaccine,
here, um, a couple weeks before this, or
which is another thing I'm going to say is service coordination in housing. We were able to have pharmacies across the United States come to the facility and give the COVID-19 vaccines, which was absolutely a blessing, so that people didn't have to go out in the public. They didn't have to worry about how to get a ride. And that was just another thing that was just remarkable to be able to do for residents.
yeah, it was, and I was
Right.
extremely blessed because here I am. I wasn't even 40 then, but
And
because
your family got to get
yes,
vaccinated as
yes,
well. Yes. And a friend, I think a
yeah,
friend as well.
because
Yeah.
I lived here, and Kathleen knew me and vouched for me, and she was aware of my parents and how my dad had cancer, and so just
Right. Right.
so uh, thank you, Kathleen, for visiting with me today. And
Absolutely. And if you would one more time just hold up your book so that anybody watching, any service coordinators, anybody, case managers, anyone who just wants to learn a little bit more, um, please pick the book up and read it. You will learn so
so,
much.
in case the font is hard, Fighting the War Against OCD, A Season in the Life of Gregory Gene Conrad. You just need the first part, really. Plug that into
Right.
Amazon,
Excuse me.
and you can get it as paperback, Kindle, or Audible. I did the voice recording for the book as well. So,
Right.
But thank you so
And
much.
again, yeah, I'm a service coordinator here in Albuquerque, New Mexico for Rio Vista Apartments. And if anybody out there has any questions on how to help a client or resident, if I could be of any help, please reach out, email, um, you know,
And
leave me your email.
along that lines, I would say the same. If anyone wants to better understand OCD, I would love to help people understand it more. And I've
Right.
done a number of presentations since the one here, so I'm much more comfortable with that process too. So, but we are here to help in whatever way we can.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
I am
Well, thank you for having me, Gregory. I'm so excited and I appreciate it. And everyone take care. And until next time.
until next time.
Until next
Thanks,
time.
Kathleen.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Gregory.
audience. Bye.
Bye bye.